It's June 8, Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum continues its operation. My name is Vasylenko, and now we will be talking about the catastrophe at Kakhovka HPP and the reaction of the world. Joining us online is Oleksandra Vasylenko, Director General for Economic Diplomacy and Sanctions Policy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Special Commissioner for Humanitarian and Sanctions Policy. Ms. Oleksandra, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Ms. Oleksandra, can you please tell us how has the world reacted to this catastrophe? What is the agenda for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? What, how, and when will your ministry do in response to this situation? First of all, I would like to pay attention to the humanitarian reaction. As of the midday 6th of June, we submitted the first request to the European Civil Protection Mechanism, which unites all the EU countries and the partners which are not parts of the European Union, like Norway and Switzerland. And as of today, we've received the support from 6 countries of EU who reacted to our request. The State Emergency Service of Ukraine submitted that request, followed by the request by the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, and now Poland, Austria, Czech Republic, Germany, Switzerland, Norway, and Finland have provided humanitarian aid. It was offered by them, and the State Emergency Service now processes the issue of delivery of humanitarian aid. The food ratio, about 200,000 from Finland, then inflatable boats, generators, water pumps, and mud pumps to deter the water flow. They also provide the powerful generators and the water purification systems, which is extremely important in this situation with Kakhovka HPP, because apart from flooding, and the situation keeps evolving, we're seeing the evolution, the unfolding of a dynamic humanitarian crisis which has not reached its peak. According to our estimates, the water has not reached its maximum level, so the crisis is ahead. But what we're seeing is the pestilence of fish. In those areas which are flooded, there is already a strong smell, and the immediate reaction by the Ministry of Health is about to follow. We're in active communication with all of our partners in the multilateral and bilateral level to make sure we receive all the necessary medicines in the timely manner. Ukraine also activated dialogue with EDRRCC, is the crisis center of NATO. Today there will be a briefing of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who will inform the NATO member countries about the situation in Ukraine, and we will continue this dialogue to build the mechanisms of support in these crisis situations. So you've told us about the humanitarian track, but the future diplomatic track, diplomatic and sanctions track. So how is the situation to unfold in this area? What can be the diplomatic sanctioned reaction of the countries to this tragedy? Thank you very much for this question. Right now I'm in Brussels, actually, where there is a roundtable going on efficiency of sanction policy and fighting with countering sanctions or making the way around. And now all the representatives of 27 countries, including the representatives of academic circles, civil organizations, are present here to discuss how to ensure the efficiency of sanctions, because for the time being it's a very pressing issue. It's a critical issue for all of us, the efficiency of sanctions and the reaction to making way around the sanctions, the way that Russia tries to adapt to sanctions. A lot of attention was paid to the logistic way around sanctions. Russia develops their connections with Iran and we want to make sure this corridor does not develop. We're talking with the insurance companies, the companies that provide financial sectors, for transportation companies to disable this supply. We're trying to build the dialogue with our colleagues from United States and European Union and Great Britain to make sure that the countries which do not join the sanctioned coalition, to explain the matters of compliance to them. A lot of attention is being paid to KYC procedures and other sanction related issues. We will pay a lot of attention to financial compliance price cap and impossibility of making way around price cap. So this is the first question we will be discussing today: how to make sure that the sanction regime is most efficient. What else can be done to make sure that the critical sectors of economy of Russian Federation are unable to develop and thus do not provide for incessant manufacturing of arms in the territory of Russian Federation. We're talking about the defense and industry complex. We draw attention of everybody to the non-sanctioned facilities, about all the manufacturing chains, what is necessary for manufacturing of cruise missiles. It's about the microchips, electronics, semiconductors. We pay a lot of attention to the delivery of raw materials to Russian Federation, to make sure that it's not being delivered and to make sure it's not used in the defense and security complex. Thank you. Questions from the floor. Good afternoon, Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrainian Forum. As to the sanctions, after the detonation of Kakhovka HPP, in the statement of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, there was the urge to the G7 and European Union to consider the sanctions for atomic sector and rocket sector of manufacturing sector. Is this call considered by the colleagues? And in humanitarian sector, don't we switch the focus to punishing the guilty ones? And how can we move this balance? How can we get back on the agenda the issue of punishing, of bringing to liability those guilty? So let's start with the airspace, then humanitarian track, and then go on. Yes, we've urged to use sanctions against the rocket building industry of Russian Federation because it's one of our top priorities. We continue our dialogue with European Union as to the sanctions on the nuclear sector of Russian Federation because it's of utmost importance for the time being. And on top of the detonation of the Kakhovka HPP is another indicator of the fact that the system of security of one of the biggest Ukrainian nuclear facilities is violated. I'm talking about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and we continue to emphasize it in a dialogue with our colleagues in both bilateral and multilateral level, the necessity of control over the safety and security of the nuclear facilities. So yes, this dialogue is underway. As to the 11th package of sanctions, it contains those articles that I've mentioned, specifically the reaction to the attempts to make way around sanctions by transportation of Russian oil at the price over price caps. So the sanctions will spread over the ships which reload the oil ship to ship or which switch off the transponders, and special attention is being paid to expansion of the list of the precursors and double purpose products which are used for printed circuits, which are necessary for manufacturing of cruise missiles and which are necessary for the nuclear sector. Well, and another question, yeah, how can we switch the focus from humanitarian aid to bringing those guilty to liability? Well, look, Ukraine, starting from the 24th of February of 2022, we are in a dynamically developing humanitarian crisis, all of Ukraine. So in no case we have to switch the focus. Those are two parallel tracks. The urge to provide the humanitarian aid, to evacuate people, and to mitigate the consequences of the humanitarian catastrophe which is unfolding in the south of Ukraine, it's one track, and the identification of the guilty, identification of the guilt of Russian Federation, recognition of Russian Federation guilty of ecocide and genocide of Ukrainian nation, and creating of the environmental catastrophe not only for us but for the whole world, because we are deeply integrated. And the flood will be followed by the drought, which is something that will undermine the food security not only of Ukraine but of the whole world. So it will have effect on the supply and manufacturing of the food, and the price for food will grow respectively. Those are two very important focuses that don't overlap in each other in no way. Thank you very much. Another question. Yesterday, the president of Turkey, Erdogan, pronounced the idea to create an international commission which would include the specialists from United Nations, Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia to investigate the detonation of the dam of Kakhovka HPP. How was this idea perceived by the MFA, and why it's not obvious for the world that it's an act of terrorism? Well, the matter of evaluation of consequences is very important for us. We need to calculate the losses and forecast the consequences which are about to follow. For the time being, to fulfill all of those activities in a prompt manner before the water level falls, it's the question mostly to the specialists who deal with the environmental risks. As to ambiguous and unambiguous nature of perception of this fact, it's maybe incompetence of the minister, because he is in touch with the leaders of other countries of the world, with the governments of our allies, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs works on provision and documenting of evidences who really did it. So it's the matter of continuous dialogue with our colleagues. I'm convinced that the recognition of consequences and recognition of those guilty is a matter of time, and it's a matter of short time. If we have no more questions, then we will thank Oleksandra Vasylenko, Director General for Economic Diplomacy and Sanctions Policy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, for this comprehensive information and joining our broadcast. We will continue at 1400. Joining us will be Dmytro Zarupa, First Deputy Head of State Environmental Inspection of Ukraine, and we will talk about the terroristic act at Kakhovka HPP. See you shortly.